Hey scholars! Welcome to Mathora. I'm Miss B and you'll be learning with me. Today, we're going to learn how to solve adding and subtracting decimal word problems. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to solve real-world decimal word problems, add and subtract positive multi-digit decimals, identify arithmetic operations, and demonstrate accurate calculation and clear reasoning. First, we're going to tap into what we already know, aka our prior knowledge. Then, we're going to get into the lesson, and throughout the lesson, I'm going to check for your understanding. Let's talk about the basics. Back in elementary school, you learned how to add and subtract from right to left, and your numbers always had to line up correctly. You also learned how to regroup. Regrouping means carrying a number over when adding or borrowing from the place value in front of a number to make another place value bigger when subtracting. Also, in elementary school, you learn how to read, and that's important because today we are solving word problems, not just equations. So in this lesson, we're going to take those elementary skills and apply them to decimals in real-world situations. So let's talk about the steps. This is how you add and subtract decimals. Step 1. Line up the decimals first, not the numbers, the decimals. Step 2. If there are any empty place values, fill them in with zeros. Step 3. Add and subtract like normal, and also keep the decimal in the same spot. Decimals may look scary at first, but honestly, we're just adding and subtracting like we already know how to do. Now, before we get into the word problems, we need to talk about keywords and phrases. These words help us identify which operation we should use. Here are some addition clues: in all, altogether, total, and combined. These usually mean we should add. Here are some subtraction clues: remains, left, change, how much is left. These usually mean we should subtract something from something. And my last tip before we get started, make sure you read the entire story problem before solving because your answer should actually make sense when you go back and reread the problem. All right, scholars, let's get into example 1. A toy costs $4.30. A keychain costs $2.65. How much do they cost altogether? Well, there's our key word, altogether. And altogether means that we should be adding. So I'm going to take the cost of the toy, 4.30, and I'm going to add it to the cost of the keychain, 2.65. I know I did step 1 correctly because my decimals are lined up. So now I can add like normal. So we're going to get 5, So we're going to get 5, 9, keep the decimal in the same spot, and 6. Now, 6.95 is not our answer. We need to use our units. And we were talking about money. So therefore, I'm going to put a $sign here. To answer the question, how much do they cost altogether? Well, they cost $6.95 altogether. Be sure to box in your final answer. Example 2. A surfboard is 7.9 feet long. You cut off 2.63 feet. How many feet are left? Well, there's our key word, left. And left means that we should be subtracting. So we're going to start with how much we had, 7.9, and we're going to subtract how much we cut off, 2.63. So I'm going to write 7.9 minus 2.63. Step 1 is done. I lined up my decimals correctly. Now, here we see an example of step 2. We have an empty spot right here, and the only thing we can put in an empty spot is a 0. However, we have to do some regrouping. 9 is going to become an 8, and 0 is going to become a 10. Now I can subtract. That's going to give us 7, 2, keep the decimal in the same spot, and 5. 5.27 is not our final answer. We need to answer in the units that we were talking about, and we were talking about feet. Our final answer is going to be 5.27 feet. Be sure to box in your final answer. Check for understanding. Why is it important to line up your decimals and show your work? Go ahead and pause the video and answer in full sentences before I show you my answer. Here's my answer. It is important to line up your decimals to make sure you're adding and subtracting in the correct place value. It is important to show your work in order to catch calculation mistakes and see if your answer makes sense. Example 3. A movie ticket costs $13.25. You pay with a $20 bill. How much change will you get? So there is our keyword, change. That means we should be subtracting. So we're going to subtract from the total amount that we had, which was $20, from how much we spent, which was $13.25. So first, I'm going to write 20. Now 20 does not have a decimal, and behind every whole number is an imaginary decimal there, and it's 0.0. So for example, 1 is really 1.0. 2 is really 2.0. That is the same thing as 1. That is the same thing as 2. So 20.0 is the same thing as 20. So now that we have a decimal, I can go ahead and subtract 13.25. So I'm going to write 13 point, you see my decimals are lined up, 25. And now I can clearly see that we have an empty spot here. And the only thing we can put in an empty spot is 0. If you did not put a 0 there, you might answer your question something like this. However, that is not the correct way that we subtract. We have to subtract something from something. So therefore, we need to put a 0 here. Now we can subtract like normal. However, we do have a lot of regrouping that we need to do. So starting off with our 2, we're going to make that a 1, make this a 10. We need to regroup again, make that a 9, make this a 10. We need to regroup again, make that a 9, make this a 10. So that's going to give us 5, 7, 6, and 0. But we're not going to write our 0. However, 6.75 is not our final answer. We were talking about money, and the question says, how much change will you get? So your final answer is going to be $6.75. Be sure to box in your final answer. Example 4. Darcy went to the movies on Saturday. She bought a drink for $3.25 and popcorn for $8.49. She used a $25 gift card. How much is left on the gift card? Well, here we have a clue, left. That means we should subtract. So we need to start with the amount of money that Darcy had. And Darcy had $25 to spend, right? And she spent $3.25 on a drink and $8.49 on popcorn. So before we subtract from $25, we need to figure out how much she spent altogether. So actually, we are going to be adding first. We need to find out the total amount of what she spent. So we're going to do 3, let's move it over. We're going to do 3.25 plus 8.49. Because 9 plus 5 is 14, we need to carry that 1. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is going to be 7. And then 8 plus 3 is going to be 11. Now, we are talking about money here. So therefore, she spent $11.74 in total. But does that answer our question? Our question says, how much is left on the gift card? Well, it's not $11.74 that's left on the gift card. That doesn't really make any sense. That is the total amount that she spent. So we need to take this amount and subtract it from how much she had to start off with. So we're going to start with 25. 25 does not have a decimal, and remember, behind every whole number is an imaginary decimal with a 0. So now that 25 has a decimal, I know where to line up my decimal. So I'm going to do minus 11.74. My decimals are lined up. I am good to go, not just yet. And for that empty spot, we must fill it in with a 0. Now I can subtract like normal. However, we do have some regrouping. So we're going to start with our 5 and make it a 4. Make this 0 a 10, but we need to borrow again. So we're going to make it a 9 and make this one a 10. So it's going to give us 6, 2, keep the decimal in the same spot, 3, and 1. Question says, how much is left on the gift card? And so therefore, $13.26 is left on the gift card. She can go to the movies again. Be sure to box in your final answer. Check for understanding. Pause this video and read this word problem and solve it. Then press play to reveal my answer. Watch me solve this word problem. The final answer is Jamal spent $173.70 in 2 days. And that's the end of the lesson. Like if you understand how to solve decimal word problems, subscribe for more learning made clear, and comment a green heart if you made it this far. Be sure to check out my website for games, worksheets, and more. Bye, scholars!